So I'm happy to be here with you and to reveal the unique recipe, which is the best part of finding the secret of your shadow, is being able to understand about your unique recipe as created by Debbie Ford. And so this is the second chapter, and here it is, your unique recipe. In your life, you have tasted the sweetness of love, the sour disappointment of loss, the bitterness that remains after too many heartbreaks. Every one of these experiences is part of your unique recipe. You wouldn't be you without them. These experiences, when integrated and understood, will give you everything you need, every bit of wisdom, insight, and strength to live your ultimate dream. The universe in all its perfection conspires to give us exactly what we need to fulfill our recipe. It gives us all the happiness, all the unhappiness, the wanting, the fulfillment, the addiction, the aspirations, the trauma, the divorce. Think about the unique circumstances each of us were born into. Some of us were born African American, others Caucasian, Hispanic, Asian, or multiracial. Some of us were smothered, while others were neglected. Some of us were beaten, and some were coddled. Some of us were given everything, while others had nothing. We may think we got a bad lot in life. We got the precise lot we needed to complete our recipe. Every experience of our life has contributed a distinct and essential ingredient to the recipe called you. Imagine that God is a master chef whose desire is to create millions of different desserts in order to please and delight his children. In his wisdom, he knows that many different ingredients are necessary to make such a feast. He knows that a cake made only with sugar will not satisfy. So he gave us all the ingredients we would need to become the most delicious dessert we could be. Every experience of loss and gain, pleasure and pain, contributed an essential ingredient. Each of these ingredients is filled with wisdom and exists to teach us, to guide us, and deliver vital information that will support us in becoming the person we most desire to be. So here's the recipe called Debbie Ford. Inside the painful, dramatic story of Debbie, she found the perfect recipe to create the Debbie she longed to be. Her list of ingredients began with being the youngest of 3 children, with a brother and sister who were not exactly excited to meet her. Mixed into her recipe was a desperate need to be liked and accepted, and an extremely sensitive emotional system. Add to that a noisy internal dialogue that constantly battered her, letting her know how unwanted and how unlovable she was. Stir in 13 years of drug abuse so she could learn the depths of her own darkness and develop a profound relationship with powerlessness. Blend in a little self-loathing and a massive dose of neurosis. Mix in a large amount of self-determination so she would be driven to devote 5 years of her life to searching for the answers to some of life's most difficult questions. Add in 25 years experience in making everything and everyone wrong. God wrong, the universe wrong, her parents wrong, so that she would know with certainty that she had the power to make herself miserable for the rest of her life. Finally, add a pinch of arrogance and a belief that she knew it all, and you have the perfect recipe to motivate her to find the answers to how she could love and accept all the parts of herself. It took her many years to see that her mission to fix herself was an endless and thankless task, a bottomless pit leading her nowhere. She truly believed she would feel better once she got rid of the parts of her recipe she didn't like, but struggling unsuccessfully against the unwanted parts of her led her to discover that she didn't need to get rid of anything. Instead, she needed to integrate and embrace everything. She realized that in order to be the me, the Debbie she always desired, she would need every ingredient that had gone into her batter. She would need every experience of weakness and strength, fear and courage, success and failure. As long as she kept trying to stick her hand in the batter and rip out certain unwanted ingredients, her trauma, her weakness, her self-doubt, she would remain an uncooked lump of potential. But if she integrated all her ingredients and mixed them up and appreciated the unique contribution they made, she would finally be able to recognize that she had all the makings of the perfect me, the perfect Debbie. She had spent years trying to become someone other than herself. So the realization that all she had to do was stop trying to be something she wasn't was totally enlightening. She came to understand that in order to make the perfect cake, you sometimes need a little salt, and that when you overcompensate for your batter's bitterness by adding heaps of sugar, your cake becomes indigestible. You see, each of us comes into this world with a particular mission, as if a recipe for our highest fulfillment were written within our souls. This recipe is different for each of us. There are no two recipes that are exactly the same. To discover the recipe called you, you must distinguish what lies in your batter. Her recipe required her to wait 38 years to find the perfect man to spend her life with. Then it called for her to give birth to her most favorite person, Bo Bressler, in the entire universe, only to watch her marriage fall apart in front of her. The next ingredient was an unexpected divorce when Bo was an infant that kicked up all the trauma and pain from her own parents' divorce. And then the overwhelming fear that she couldn't make it on her own added some nice flavor so that she could muster up the courage and the strength to write her first book, The Dark Side of Light Chasers, which was the process that she created, the shadow process, in a book. All those traumas, those ingredients, gave her the willingness and wisdom to dig down deep inside her soul and produce the book. That would be the end. That was just the beginning. In a million years, she would have never guessed that all her pain and darkness, all her selfishness and her never-ending desire to make a difference in the world were being carefully blended together so that she would be able to step into the highest version of herself. But the perfect recipe for her life was waiting to be discovered. She learned to trust in the powers that be and came to the humbling realization that no one really knows what experiences we need in order that we may give our greatest gift. She didn't, and you don't. So in doing what was necessary to heal her issues with her ex-husband, she was unknowingly gathering wisdom and essential ingredients to add to her recipe, preparing to write her second book, Spiritual Divorce, which forced her to grow and expand and take responsibility for her reality, no matter what her ex-husband or anyone else for that matter was doing. It forced her to take the high road and ask, how am I going to grow from this? How can I use this to make me my most divine self? Of course she had other options. She could have hated her pain. She could have felt very sorry for herself because she had a lot of pain. Instead, she chose to look for the gold, the jewels, and say, why would I need this? What can I extract from this situation? What can I now contribute that I couldn't have if I had never had this experience? She has lived the perfect life to do the work she did because she couldn't support others in healing her pain and creating all this work and these books and creating the life of the dreams that she lived if she hadn't first done this for herself. A divine buffet. Imagine flipping through your favorite cookbook and seeing several recipes for passionate, fulfilled, abundant, extraordinary human beings. Intrigued, you quickly turn to the indicated pages to learn what ingredients would make up such masterpieces. And on the first page, you would see, mixed together, 14 traumas, 4 heartbreaks, a mother who loved too much, a father who is emotionally unavailable, and 1 cheating husband. Blend in the opportunity to being a single mother with 2 children. Add 4 extra doses of selfishness, a shadow belief that says I'm not good enough, and an ego that screams, I'm going to prove to everyone that I am good enough, and voila. You have 42-year-old Linda, a perfectly satisfied chief financial officer of a $17 million company. Or try this one on the Divine Buffet in the recipe book. Combine divorced parents with twin brothers who badger you on a daily basis. Mix in 4 years of a bad marriage and one very successful business, 6 years of depression, one immunodeficiency disease. Add a noisy internal dialogue to remind you that there is definitely something wrong with you. Garnish with a deep inner knowing that things will work out if you suffer long enough. Add a passionate love of music and the arts. Bake it high intensity for 43 years, and presto, you have Jeffrey, a songwriter and producer of a children's TV show that teaches kids how to be kind to each other. Or how about the taste of start with 2 parents with high expectations and a need to control your every move. Add a heaping dose of inadequacy, 12 years of striving to be the perfect student, 16 amazing victories and 16 experiences of deep emptiness. Add 2 suicide attempts and 4 opportunities to be brought to your knees. Sprinkle in a love for math and science and a knack for empathizing with people's problems. Add an unshakable faith in God and stir in 1 serving of self-realization. Chill for 32 years, meet Pam, a pediatric psychologist with a holistic approach. It's fairly easy to see how your positive attributes contribute to your unique recipe. You can probably appreciate how your talents, your natural abilities, and your childhood dreams have added to your life and to the person you've become. But the traumatic events in your life, the experiences that left wounds within you, are an equally important part of the mix that will help you become all that you can be. Every insecurity, every fear, every tragedy, every obsession, every broken relationship and shameful incident holds clues that are leading you toward your most magnificent self. Blend them together, and they will propel you into the unique contribution that you are. If you embrace all the ingredients in your recipe and allow them to be part of your batter, what will come out of the oven is the person your soul longs to be. Using your ingredients. Most of us suffer endlessly from the painful and unwanted parts of our recipe. But there are some extraordinary people who choose to use their pain to contribute to the world. The death of a child is one of the worst ingredients anyone could imagine having in their recipe, but what if it was the divine plan for you to use that experience to save the lives of thousands of other children? John Walsh, the host of America's Most Wanted, did just that. After his 6-year-old son Adam was murdered, John became an advocate for victims' rights and brought awareness to a subject that had for years been buried in the dark. Unwilling to allow his child to die in vain, John turned his anger into action and established a national program to incarcerate tens of thousands of criminals and sex offenders. John Walsh could just as easily have chosen to wallow in his grief for years, but instead, he chose to use it to make a contribution to the world. Identified as one of the most severely abused children in the state of California, Dave Peltzer was brutally beaten and starved by his emotionally unstable and alcoholic mother. Through his courage, strength, and forgiveness, Dave turned his wounds into wisdom and wrote a gripping account of his life story, which touched the lives of millions. His book, A Child Called It, was a New York Times bestseller for 3 years and was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. While few would consciously choose severe physical and emotional abuse as part of their life's recipe, we have to thank God that Dave chose to use experience to make a profound difference to the lives of others. When she was just 19 years old, Helen Keller was rendered blind and deaf after suffering a nearly fatal fever. Rising above the ignorance of her time and her own frustration, Helen became determined to interact with the world using her remaining 3 senses. She became a skilled and passionate communicator and the author of 13 books. Lecturing around the world in support of the handicapped, and the underprivileged, she almost single-handedly destroyed age-old myths about blindness. Imagine what the world would have missed if Helen Keller had made the choice to immerse herself in self-pity, rejecting the ingredients in her unique recipe. Viktor Frankl, founder of the humanist movement, along with 4 other founders from the time of the Holocaust, was imprisoned in Auschwitz for 5 years. After his mother, father, and pregnant wife were all killed by the Nazis, Frankl clung to what he called the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Embracing the devastating ingredient of these deaths inspired by Frankl's to write Man's Search for Meaning, a book that has been recognized as among the most influential works of humanistic literature. We need to be able to look at our entire history, including our traumas, handicaps, failures, and life circumstances, and say, thank you, God, for giving me that. Because these experiences were tailor-made to support us in delivering our unique contribution. Just think about it. Why did some events wound you so deeply when they didn't matter at all to the rest of your family? Consider that you needed the wisdom that incident had to offer you. Maybe that pain held a huge lesson that you would have missed if it hadn't been so severe. Maybe you needed to be born with a devastating handicap so you could prove the indestructibility of your spirit. Maybe you needed to survive the devastating loss of your child so you could save thousands of others. Maybe you needed to bottom out on drugs, alcohol, or self-loathing before you could muster up the courage to take responsibility for your life. All of our traumas and emotional issues exist in order to support us in the unfolding of our highest selves. Many of our most important ingredients are hidden under a veil of pain. This pain is encoded with vital information and wisdom that we need to assemble our unique gifts. There is nobody who can teach what you can teach. Until you see the perfection of all your ingredients, you will constantly be trying to change, fix, and heal your story, then using it for the divine purpose for which it was intended. The pain of hating your recipe. Most of us spend the majority of our lives judging the ingredients in our recipe, making what's inside us wrong. We say, I have too many eggs, or there's not enough sugar, or if I only had more spice. In other words, we reject some aspects of ourselves while we embrace others. For as long as she can remember, my girlfriend Shirley was told she had a big mouth. She used to get into trouble at school for talking too much and felt like an outsider in her circle of friends because it wasn't cool to have so many opinions. Even her family was embarrassed by her outspokenness and cautioned her on more than one occasion to tone it down a bit. Shirley spent the first 20+ years of her life hating this ingredient in her recipe and tried unsuccessfully many times to get rid of it. And then one day, while attending her favorite sociology class in college, Shirley was passionately speaking out as usual. After the class, her professor took Shirley aside and said, "You talk too much. Have you ever considered pursuing a career in radio? You could get paid to talk all day long." Suddenly, a light flashed in Shirley's mind, and she saw a huge gift in this ingredient, and she had always considered to be a curse. Shirley went on to create an award-winning radio show, went on to be the voice of the Academy Awards, which I am going to add in here, and today she enjoys a rewarding career as an outspoken and well-loved radio talk show host and voiceover artist. It is not an easy task to see the perfection of your wounds and inadequacies, but there are no accidents. All of you, are divine. You might not be expressing the divine in your current form, but I assure you that once you transform your emotional wounds, you will see their perfection. Take horse manure, for example. If you went for a walk in the country and found a pile of manure on your path, you'd probably cringe and back away. But to a master gardener interested in growing the biggest and best roses or adding vibrant color to a crunchy bell pepper, that same pile of manure would look like pure gold. What most of us call poop The gardener calls pure potential because he recognizes it as just the ingredient he needs to nourish his garden. Hating any part of our recipe guarantees that we will attract painful experiences into our lives. Like attract likes. Our unprocessed pain and self-loathing will call forth people and events that will reflect back to us how we feel about ourselves, whether in the form of accidents, abusive relationships, financial ruin, or bad jobs. We will constantly find ways to beat ourselves up because we carry a deep-seated belief that who we are is wrong or what has happened to us is wrong. When we are unable to see the divinity of our recipe, we are doomed to a life of anger, disappointment, wanting, and longing. Our traumas, wounds, disappointments, and pain have come bearing gifts. But until they are integrated, they will remain unprocessed lumps in our batter. When we extract the wisdom from these experiences, we find the unique ingredients for our recipe. We have all the qualities, the capabilities, the wisdom, the perfection, the imperfection, and the wherewithal that it takes to bring forth and give the gift that only we possess. In metaphorical terms, this process is about gathering, sifting, mixing, and blending the ingredients we already have in order to make the best dessert imaginable. In universal terms, it's about embracing and integrating each piece that has contributed to making us who we are today, so that we can deliver our unique creation to the world. Accepting ourselves at the deepest level and offering our unique recipe to the universe is the greatest feast of the human spirit. Our dramas are an indestructible part of who we are. No matter what we do or how hard we try, we cannot get rid of them. The only choice we have to make is whether we are going to use them or they are going to use us. I've chosen to use the drama of my dramatic life story, says Debbie, to write her books, to contribute to others, and to earn her living. Maybe that was the master plan for her, to suffer endlessly for 26 years and then to learn from her past, to heal her pain, and turn around and help others learn to transcend their suffering. She wrote this book grateful for her pain, knowing that she could never teach what she taught without it. She thanked God for the trash and the trauma of her past. Otherwise, half of the pages of her books would be empty. So look into your recipe, says Debbie. Look into your story and see what you are not accepting and blessing. This is a good place to begin. Until you see the necessity of owning all of who you are, you can't extract the jewels from every experience of your life, and your story will continue to use you. It will continue to clobber you over the head and make you act as though you're small. But the moment you see the value in the parts of you hate, as well as those you feel good about, the moment you recognize that painful event as the perfect ingredient to make your recipe complete, you will witness the magic of transformation. You will bless what you formerly saw as a curse. You will watch as the horrid becomes holy. Remember, you can spend the next 40 years trying to take your ingredients out of your batter, or you can just stir and allow all your trauma, victories, heartaches, and joys to blend into the divine mix called you. That is your unique recipe.